Hi, in this video I'd like to talk about motivation, drive, improvement, self-improvement, but from a very different angle than what might what one might assume. Now, this video and these thoughts came about because of a viewer who made a comment on one of my videos. The video is Reflections on MGTOW and the scrap heap we call relationships. I'm not going to mention his name, but I hope he doesn't mind me reading off what he wrote, because it did in part serve as motivation for what I'm doing now. And he writes the following. I will admit, Stardust, I am at an impasse. I still desire females, vestigially, but I am fully in support of MGTOW. The problem is, I realize, much of what I have done and do is because I want attention of women. Or perhaps I feel this way. Why should I exercise? Why should I deny myself an Oreo cookie, or 4, or 5? What is the point of being healthy and productive when I can surround myself with base but cyberitic delights? I fear that I only improve to attract women. It is an addiction. And I think there's a lot of truth in that statement, unfortunately. I've often talked about men's seeming need, rather desire for women beyond the level of an addiction. It's so strong. And this particular aspect of the addiction, namely this need to improve oneself, or the desire, rather, the desire to improve oneself, needs to be questioned in part. Now, there's nothing wrong with the wanting to improve yourself. It's a great thing. Or improve your hobbies, or to get better at something for that matter. But we really need to dig deep here and question the motivation. What lies behind it all? And I think this gentleman hit the nail on the head. Much of what men do, rather on a very subconscious level, and not always subconscious, and I can give some examples, is revolves around improving themselves so they can climb up the so-called dominance hierarchy ladder. So they can improve themselves, so they can acquire a better female. This is really ultimately what the vast majority of male improvement is all about. There are some exceptions, but for example, you can have a very explicit desire to quote unquote improve oneself when one goes to the gym to improve one's physique, to make oneself more attractive to females. Um, it's patently obvious, but the vast majority of men who enter into high-paying business or legal-related jobs are doing so for the prestige, i.e., the status, and so they have better access to a larger pool of quote-unquote uh, correct females, or quality females that would. Females don't have a dominance hierarchy, but certainly the attractive ones at the very least. So a lot of motivation, subconscious. That's the conscious stuff. Subconsciously, it could really be anything. Um, the smallest decisions, and unfortunately, because it's in large measure subconscious, a lot of men aren't aware of this. I think this is one of the big stumbling blocks in being a man going his own way. Uh, I don't want to get too much into this because it's kind of a secondary issue, but I've watched some videos by some men going their own way in response to Girl Writes What, and the level of despondency and despair is quite prominent. Uh, I I can relate to it in as much as I talked about the stages, that my initial stages might have been somewhat similar, and now these days I'm pretty benumbed to it all. But the sense of purposelessness that they attribute to MGTOW, although they've decided to go on the path, and this is not censure. I'm not censuring them for feeling this way. I think it's a natural feeling in the steps of the evolution of a man going in his own way, that sense of despair and purposelessness. That kind of dovetails and coincides with uh, what we're talking about here, namely motivation. Why do you want to improve yourself? It takes a lot, admittedly, to look at what the source for that motivation and desire to improve yourself is, and recognizing that in many, many cases it's simply to attract women. And then once you're MGTOW, mind going your own way, well, what happens then? A lot of those activities potentially could cease. That's not always the case. For example, I used to be religious about lifting weights and going to the gym. I've been for the past couple of months quite remiss in it. It has nothing to do with women, though. It's just I just don't find the motivation anymore. Who knows? Maybe it's because I'm older and I don't see the same results. So it doesn't have to be that, but oftentimes, a lot of the things, as this gentleman talks about, exercise. Why should he not eat an Oreo cookie or four or five? Being healthy and productive, all of these things, unfortunately, in the vast majority of men's cases, are done not for their own sake, for their own enjoyment or pleasure, but to please women ultimately, to climb up that stupid dominance hierarchy ladder. And there are notable exceptions. I think as modern society has developed further, and there's just a plethora, never-ending choice of activities you can engage in. There really are things that men do and engage in that have nothing to do with that. And I'm offering these examples as a source of, I don't like to use the word hope, but as a source, an idea um, of something that might not have anything to do with wanting to impress females. So, for example, role-playing games. There are a lot of pen and paper, online and otherwise, computer games, uh, these kinds of things. Uh, there might be some element of competition in it, but the end result, I mean, most women don't give a shit whether or not you score really high or whether you come up with a clever evasive tactic to escape a dragon trying to eat you. I mean, it's ludicrous to think that they would actually care about that sort of thing. Um, Barring occasional females that are interested in this sort of stuff, maybe that could be a reason. You never know, but no, certainly there are many activities that don't revolve around attracting women that men engage in for the sake of the pleasure they bring or the fun they have with their friends, things like that. But some of the core things, staying healthy, exercising, acquiring a job, following the route of the success model, and so on and so forth, unfortunately, inevitably, seem to fall within the domain of improvement for the sake of attracting females. Now, it's not my job nor my desire, really, to talk the vast majority of men out there out of their addiction. But I assume most of the men who watch my channel, the few trolls who come here making obscene and underhanded comments, are basically men going their own way. So I think as a man going your own way, you do need to think about your motivation. You might need to take a step backwards in the sense that there might be some regression. So initially, if you're on board with going your own way, uh, and you realize that a lot of the things you used to do, maybe you're really fastidious about taking care of yourself and who knows, cycling, exercising, doing any of these sorts of things, maybe you begin caring less about your job. Now, there could be all sorts of reasons why you care less about your job, but just as an example, because you realize the reason why you were quote unquote cared was because you thought you could, one up another man in the dominance hierarchy competition, or do something to improve your lot in any event in the eyes of women. Because as a man, you're going your own way, you sort of put that behind you. One would hope, or you're trying to. Well, I mean, it is a never-ending process. We all suffer from the addiction. You need to look for new motivation. Now, there is a lot to be said in just the joy of engaging in activities for their own sake. So, for example, on my other channel, I make strategy guides for gameplay, and people seem to appreciate it a lot. But I don't have a huge audience, and the people who do watch it, they appreciate it, and the people who don't, well, most of them don't, because they don't watch it. But I do it mostly for my own sake. It's something I enjoy doing on occasion, and if I can see people benefit from it, then I'm happy for that reason. So it doesn't have to be. Uh, there are a lot of things you can do. Even exercise. Um, Maybe it was subconscious in past years. I like to think not. But no, I used to be religious about going to the gym and lifting weights because it was sort of like meditation for me. Desperately need to get back into the same rhythm. It's very hard to find the motivation though these days. I don't know why. I think it doesn't have anything to do with MGTOW. It has a lot more to do with just getting older and getting being more susceptible to injury and hard to say. But whatever activities you might enshrine for yourself, you might want to put it under the microscope and think, well, why am I doing this? Um, because it is important to deconstruct motivation and why you're doing things. If you can't do that as a man going your own way, you might still be subconsciously, tacitly, towards yourself tacitly, following principles and guidelines that you were following just for the sake of attracting women to gain a leg up in the dominance hierarchy ladder. It's something that we all need to consider, and something that is very, very difficult to suppress. Now, there, there, there is some truth to this in a way. So, for example, I'll just yeah, anecdotally at the job, my current job where I work at, I'm constantly getting comments about how I kind of look schlumpy, that a bit, sloven. In my job, I don't need to dress up anyway, but I don't bother shaving that often. I literally just don't care. I leave the house in a condition in previous jobs I never would have, or that's not to say I look like a total wreck heap, but I don't shave. Sometimes I look a bit unkempt. I just don't care. Um, but what's interesting about that is the reaction I get from some of my colleagues. Some of them understand, some of them themselves don't care that I don't care, but some just find it alarming. People who are just, I have one colleague, for example, who's very much beholden to his instincts. I think at base he's a nice guy, but anyway, he's always making comments. I mean, yesterday, I literally just said, you have a pimple on your face. And, yeah, so what? So I think there is something to be said for that. I mean, there's a difference between being healthy and being, or trying to be healthy and being incredibly fastidious about your presentation. If I were at a job, which is possible in the future, where my presentation, the way I present myself, is really important, where I needed to wear a button down and look, I would be shaving every day. That's something else. It's an issue of money. But if it's not required, doing it for the sake of doing it seems pretty unproductive and pointless. On the other hand, if you're doing it to attract women, well, maybe there is a point. But I am I don't do anything to attract women these days. I have no interest in it. Yeah, just an example. Yes, certain things can become less important, less motivating when you go your own way. But that doesn't mean it's bad. Personally, I find it quite liberating. The extent that I can get away with it, my job, there is no dress code whatsoever, so I just don't care, and I take advantage of that. People with half a brain accept me on my own terms for that reason. And I think the most important thing is that you accept yourself on your own terms. Motivation it's a hard thing to find. There's so many activities that you're not, as I said, you're not doing for the sake of attracting females. But yeah, there will be some things that fall by the wayside, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you were spending, an hour in the bathroom preparing yourself to look pretty for the rest of the world, specifically for women, maybe that hour could be spent sleeping in longer or just relaxing or doing something more that you find more enjoyable. Who knows? So there are just a lot. What I'm saying is there's just a lot out there that you can do that has nothing to do with improving yourself for the sake of women. Intellectual pursuits, for example, on a final note, I think the intellectual pursuits on a whole, unfortunately, do have their origin, the desire to pursue knowledge, to improve, to compete, as it were, in the dominance hierarchy competition. But they don't need to. Let's take Barbara Russ, for example. I mean, this is a man who's fascinated by mathematics and hard sciences, something I unfortunately have no aptitude for, but I greatly admire men who have that aptitude. And so that he pursues it for not, obviously as a future engineer for a good career, but also he clearly has an interest in these things. And we all know Barbara Russ. He's not pursuing mathematical knowledge and chemical knowledge so he can improve some chick, take her out to dinner, and get laid. There are a lot of things. My interest in languages never, to my conscious knowledge, ever had anything to do with women. It was just something I was good at, and I decided I would pursue it. Although these days, once again, I've been quite remiss in that, but maybe these things will change. So it is a very legitimate concern, um, but something that can be addressed adequately because, as I said, there are many things you can do that have nothing to do with trying to attract the attention of females. But it is a sad realization that we all have to make that a lot of what men do to improve themselves, to keep themselves healthy, make money, it really stems from the singular desire to acquire a female partner, to improve oneself against other males in the dominance hierarchy competition. But certainly that's not what men going their own way is about. So we're all at different stages, and if this particular gentleman is in the stage of questioning these things, I think it's important because it all starts with questions. Um, for myself, if I'll just, to answer his specific question, he's talking about the cybernetic delights. I assume he's talking about culinary cybernetic delights. Yeah, I like a good meal as well. But if I notice that and recently I have been, I'm getting to the point where I'm eating I'm really in a caloric surplus and it's continuing for on too long, then I start regulating and I start again entering the caloric deficit for my own sake because I know it's just unhealthy and it's not something it's not a feeling I want for myself to have. So I mean, it is possible. It is possible to take what are traditionally female motivated goals and desires for improvement and apply it to yourself. And in some cases, you just don't even bother with a lot of stuff. Like I said, I shave once every couple of days. Days by gone, I would do it every day. So I mean, these sorts of things. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful. I hope it was somewhat of an explanation and an answer to this gentleman's question. And yeah, I'll see you all soon. Thanks for watching.